Alrighty, hey gang, welcome back you guys. Happy Wednesday. Another episode of Stove Chat, episode 41. I'm Matt, as always, your host, and welcome back you guys. Hope you guys had a great week. Hope you guys have been staying warm and feeling toasty by your stoves. I've had a good one. It's been lovely, and of course now that we're doing Stove Chat, the sun has come out to shine in the camera, as always. But that's good. It sure is feeling nice. I heard the birds out there this morning. It's sounding like spring. I'm ready. So welcome everybody. How are you guys? So as you guys know, we're here to talk about building heaters, masonry heaters, wood-fired cook stoves, rocket mass heaters, all that stuff. You can check my website, walkerstoves.com, where I sell plans for a whole host of heaters and stoves like that. And we're here to talk about the tips and tricks of how to build those, how to design them, all that stuff. So website link should be in the description, walkerstoves.com. Check it out. So welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Nice to see you guys. Looking in the chat here, it looks like we got a great crew. Hey Tim, good to see you. Short Bus Life, Cletus, Tall Shadow, Andre, nice to see you. Belgian Gulch, as always, great to see you. Always learning. Lovely to see you, my friend. Happy sunny day here in Washington. Permaculture Playground, glad you made it. Glad you didn't miss it this week. And yeah, you guys, welcome. So glad to have you all here. Thank you. Hey Ryan, nice to see you. Good communicating with you via email. Hope your pup's doing okay. I hope I didn't get that confused. I think it's you with the new puppy. So anyways, great to see all you guys. Thanks for being here. Hope you guys had a good week. It's been great for me. It's been cold. It's been real cold, so I've been really enjoying my my tiny masonry cook stove there behind me. What a joy they are to have, aren't they? All of you mass heater owners. The more time I spend with it, the more and more I appreciate it. It's just so nice having those fires in the morning and then having that body radiating that heat at you all day. It's just lovely. Hello, Brian. Thank you. That's a very nice comment. Really appreciate it. So I've been really digging this cold weather. It is starting to change. Like I said, I had a great surf last week, and I am starting to think about those kinds of things for sure. But currently enjoying the cold snap we're having, and really digging my heater. So I hope you guys have too. I want to say thank you so much to all of you for your lovely emails and comments and feedback, all that stuff. It's been really great to communicate with all you guys, and this week was a good one. Had a lot of great interaction with a lot of you this week, working on some custom designs and just helping you guys massage your plans and designs closer to your goals. And I always learn so much from talking to all of you, so thank you so much for being part of this community with me. So with that said, I've got some great stuff to go over today. I'd love to hear from you and tackle your questions. If you've got stuff, let's throw it in chat. Now's a great time to do it, especially if you're new here, just purchase plans, or are planning your build. That's what we're here for. I'm trying to be a resource to those of you who need need some guidance as you work towards your build. So by all means, don't be shy. Throw stuff in chat. Short Bus Life says, especially when cold and wet with snow and going sideways, right? Well, as soon as the weather gets nasty, the heaters just get, more and more valuable. But there's something about it. It's like, it's more than just keeping the chill off. It's just so homey. It just makes me feel so good. So, Mark Delozier, nice to see you. Sunny Southwest Ohio. Glad to hear you're enjoying some of this weather as well. Sounds like it's almost nationwide. I know that you guys on the East Coast got hammered in snow, so hopefully y'all are staying warm. So we got some great stuff to go over today, you guys. Actually, I want to start with a really interesting development to build on a conversation we had last week, and it's one that all of us were participating in, and then I just got some great firsthand experience that was sort of contradictory. So really interesting to me, and I'm excited to share this with you. So hello David, good morning, nice to see you, glad you made it. and Cletus as well. Oh, actually, I have another a few things to share. Cletus asks, "Can you please share the name of where you source the door glass? I think you mentioned it before, and I didn't make note." Yeah, Cletus. So what I'm using is a brand name called Robax, and that is a Schott, Schott product. Schott is the parent company, glass manufacturer. Robax is their ceramic glass that they use for windows and doors. It's usually pretty clear, kind of green or orangish tint. They also make the glass tops that I use for the top, and that product is called Ceram, Ceram. And for just the plain glass panes of Robax, to be honest with you, the best source I've found for that has been on eBay in the past, and it's been a while since I've looked, so it may have changed. I was able to find pieces on Amazon as well with the brand name Robax. So I think if you search Robax ceramic or even just ceramic glass, you should be able to find some reasonable sources. But I found the best pricing for whatever reason on eBay. Now, eBay, I don't really recommend buying a new product there. It's a great place to shop for vintage guitars or whatever. But you know, for new stuff, it's kind of strange. But for whatever reason, that seemed to be a good place for me to source ceramic glass. You know, hopefully that still works for you. But if not, like I said, there are some small pieces available on Amazon, and I do think just a Google search will probably get you there. So Michael, nice to see you. Thanks for being here from Austria, and thanks for our interaction this last week or 2 weeks as well, Michael. I'm really glad to see you're here and planning to move forward with your build. So Tim says, curious about Peter's P channel in J tubes. Wondering whether it would be possible to extend an L-shaped metal piece spaced off the top of the burn tunnel to inject secondary air downstream. So Tim, I'm going to reiterate one more time that changing tried and tested cores, in my opinion, is a horrible idea. We've all done the testing. You don't need to try and keep reinventing it. It's like it is for a reason. So anything you do, injecting air downstream or any of that, you're going to make it worse. I just guarantee it. So you can just forget about trying to mess with the cores. Like, just put that out of your mind. You're not going to make it better. I'm not trying to be a jerk or short, but this is just, you know, we go over this over and over again. And I just want to reiterate strongly that modifying the cores, in my opinion, is going to take you absolutely backwards 100% of the time, and you might as well just forget about it. Like, it just isn't worth thinking about. So we get these conversations all the time, and I get them a lot because I'll sell these core designs, and then people will go, "Hey, why did you do this? Have you ever thought about this?" And honestly, I get a little frustrated with those questions because, you know, we spent years testing them, and they are refined to perform as good as they possibly can given what we've tried. So if it were as simple as just moving the secondary air downstream or whatever, I can assure you that would have been done. So once again, don't mess with it. Peter did it. It's as good as it's going to get. He is so incredibly detail oriented. He's such a hard worker. He puts so much time into those tests. If you've ever followed his threads, you'll know that his attention to detail and his patience and his thoroughness it's unbelievable, to be honest with you. You know, I was greatly inspired by him to try and keep up. If you follow my secondary air tests from back in 2013, you'll know I spent a whole winter making subtle changes one by one. Just don't do it. The cores are done. You know, you can go ahead and it doesn't mean there aren't going to be any other cores designed, but it's just going to take someone with a testo and that same scientific approach to really make them any better. So don't mean to snap at you there, Tim, but don't bother. Just don't do it. Stick with the plans. They're refined. So Belgian Gulch says, I use Robax and get it through Amazon, but very expensive. So that's what I thought. You know, the Robax that I remember seeing on Amazon was pretty small pieces, and it was fairly expensive. I was able to find some bigger ones, 12 by 10 or something like that on eBay for a relatively affordable price, but that was quite a while ago now. So I imagine that there's probably going to start to be some other places available. Belgian Gulch, I would encourage you to maybe reach out to Schott and see if you could perhaps become a dealer of theirs. I know you're just, we'd be relatively small compared to what they do, but I was able to, back when I was working on my original Walker stove when I was going to Washington, D.C. for the Wood Stove Decathlon, I was able to become an account. They let me have an account with them, and I became a vendor. I dropped that because I no longer want to do retail. I'll let you take that helm, but I think you might be able to get some, and maybe then you could make that available to people more easily. So that's just a thought, but yeah, search around, Cletus. I think it'll help. And Robax, or excuse me, Amazon. Amazon and searching is kind of strange, but Robax will work well. And then Permaculture Playground says Saran, unless I scored a knockoff. No, that sounds right. I must have had it wrong. Saran was another one of their brand names, and that's for the tops usually. Now, Michael asks, how flexible are dimensions you propose? I'm not sure to get the exact dimensions which are in the plans. Well, Michael, just as with that little rant I just threw out, the dimensions really for the cores, I'd like to say that they're critical. Again, hundreds of hours, season after season of testing with multiple iterations, with single changes in every iteration, have shown us that the dimensions matter a lot. And as Michael, you and I went back and forth with regards to dimensions because you really wanted to try and fit, this thing into somewhere where I said, I'm not going to be able to make it fit there. And so with that said, I always say don't modify the cores because you will definitely change your performance. And in the case of Tim's question, he's saying, can I modify the core to increase performance? And the answer is no, you can't. I don't think you can anyways. But your question is, can I modify the core to meet a different goal, to meet a size goal? And in your case, Michael, my answer starts to get a little vague. My opinion is, if you can, never modify the core. But in your case, it might be a question of building a stove or not building a stove. So that's for you to decide. Now, I can tell you that I think it will definitely affect performance. The reason it affects performance is because the volumes of air space within the core is really the key to the whole thing's tuning. It's just like a carburetor. If you just were to change the size of the airspace inside the carburetor, well, you're going to change the tuning of your engine entirely. And so when you change the shape and size of a core, you dramatically change the rates of gas and oxygen and fuel and all that stuff. Your fuel air mix changes. So that's why we don't want you to change it. But I've given you some ideas about how you might be able to modify the core size from the outside without changing the inside dimensions. But if you've got to shave an inch in length, or you've got to shave an inch in width to make it fit in your space, that's your call. I do think you will lose performance, but it sounds, for many people, the size is more important. I personally feel like you could probably let it grow an inch into your room or 2 inches into your room. People always say, my counter is 30 inches deep and the stove is 32, and I'm like, let it stick out 2 inches. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me. I'd rather have a clean burning stove, but that's for you to decide for yourself. So, Michael, my answer is they're totally inflexible, in my opinion. If efficiency is your ultimate goal, but you as the builder and as the end user can make your own decision there, and certainly you can, whittle things down a little bit here and there. So there's that, and let's see. Patrick says hi from Sweden. Nice to see you, Patrick. And then Tim E says, to clarify, the reason I ask is because I know my draft inducer is already going to change performance. I may need to tweak elsewhere to compensate, but how will you know, Tim? That's the thing, is it's incredibly, in my opinion, foolish to tweak it when you have no way of telling. The difference between a tested stove that's running very well and one that's down 20% in efficiency, you'd never see it in the chimney. You'd never smell it. It's we've only gotten to this point now that we've gotten home testing equipment. So again, I'll just reiterate, don't Don't change it. Don't guess. Your draft inducer isn't going to change things. It's going to make it run as if it had good draft the whole time, which is what it should do. It's only going to change things if you run it to where you now are exceeding what would be its normal draft. But your draft inducer is really only there to get you to where it should be in the first place, in a build that doesn't have adequate draft. So I disagree. And I'll reiterate again, if you're changing the core, I think you're making a big mistake. I don't, otherwise why are you here, right? Like, you just build a firebox out of bricks. And so there you go. Again, sorry to harp on that, but boy, it just comes up over and over and over and over again. And so I really hope to get that solidly into our canon here, as far as like what we do and what we don't do. There's lots of things, lots of places to experiment, but the core, the combustion isn't one of them. And that doesn't mean, I experimented with cores and combustion and came up with one, using a testo and a long period of time. But and it doesn't mean if that's your interest, you shouldn't. But if I were going to be building a stove, I certainly wouldn't just start messing with the cores and throwing them together. So Ryan asks, with regards to swapping oven and combustion chamber in the tiny cook stove, how concerned should I be about rebuilding the core in future or replacing bricks or IFB? Great question, Ryan. Really good question. So, the core and the, oh boy, I'm getting a little confused here because you said IFB. So, a couple different answers here. If your core is ceramic fiberboard, let me finish. He continues, wondering if I should set fire brick splits for oven, clay, sand, or dry stack where possible for ease of takedown. I see. So ceramic fiberboard, I haven't found it to really break down much over time significantly that needs any replacing or maintenance or anything like that. However, if it's exposed, you don't have like a firebox liner, you will abrade it. So the sides of the firebox you may want to plan to replace down the road. And that's just with the ceramic fiberboard that I've used. We have had some people now come back and say they've gotten some really fluffy ceramic fiberboard that turns out it wasn't holding up. And so I'm still trying to get some names of what is holding, what brands are holding up and which ones aren't. It seems like for the most part, the higher and medium density boards are fine. But I have yet to hear back definitively from folks who've had issues where they got that product and what its density was. So my opinion, Ryan, is that your ceramic fiberboard core, with the exception of abrasion in the firebox area, but with the exception of that, it should last indefinitely. There should be no deterioration beyond that. I've had people say, well, I got a thin crust on it, and when I scraped off the crust to clean it, I took some of the fiberboard away. And my answer was, well, don't scrape at it. Like, just leave it alone, and it's fine. So I think the CFB is going to last indefinitely. If you build the core with fire brick splits, they will crack for sure down the road. Whether they need to be replaced or not is really a question of whether they cracked in such a way that they can come apart. Usually they won't. Usually they'll crack and they'll sort of just lock themselves in place. They're just sort of releasing some tension, and they're likely not going to go any farther. So they probably don't need replacement unless they, fall in from the top or something like that, which again isn't very likely. The question was, should I use clay sand or dry stack where possible? And in my opinion, I use the clay sand only to fill gaps in the core and to level bricks and things like that. If the joints aren't coming together tightly, it's a great place for a little mortar. But dry stacking is fine, and really you want very little mortar in there, kind of as little as possible, in an effort to get things to seat tightly and fit square. But you can use, like I said, a little bit if you have chips or gaps or things like that. So really that's up to you. But with regards to the rest of it, I don't think that there'll be much reason to go in there. However, since you're building a cook stove, and I think, Ryan, now that I'm thinking about it, you're Oh, I do remember. You have a unique build, so your top might be more difficult to get in than a normal one. Normally the tops it's pretty easy to go in either through the glass, or even if you have a big top, just lifting the whole big top, or maybe making that top in sections so you can lift a section. That's usually fairly easy to do, to leave yourself an in or an out for maintenance. And in the case of my stove behind me here, just when I got my door from Tom in this fall, it was pretty easy for me to just kind of remove the bricks around the door without, I stepped in like this, so I opened up sort of 3/4 of the front of it. And I mean, it was this half an hour job at best. It was so easy because of that clay sand mortar. Could just tap them with a hammer and pull the bricks out one by one without really jarring the whole build. So I think I just encourage you to, while you're building it and on your first build, it's really, easy to be like, oh boy, I'm never getting in here again. But after you've had it for a year or two, you'll realize that that one, you probably do want to make some changes now and then, and you'll probably, once you get there, be like, oh, that's no big deal. But I think more than anything, you just get comfortable with it, and you're like, oh yeah, it's fun to dive into, and let's dig in there. So I don't worry too much about that. And then David Swanson has great input. And he says Permatex muffler and tailpipe sealer can repair cracked fire bricks. So that's excellent information, David. And you've told me that before, and thank you for sharing it again. So if you do get cracks in bricks in an area where you think it might be a problem, some of that Permatex muffler and tailpipe sealant can be used to seal those gaps and stick things back together. And that will really, probably give you a little more confidence going forward. But like I said, don't be too scared about this. A lot of people say, well, I like what you're doing, but I'm hoping for a maintenance-free wood-burning device. And, I hate to say it, but I just don't think that such a thing exists. Big masonry heaters, little masonry heaters, rocket stoves, fire, wood stoves, metal box stoves, all of them go through such great heating cycles and such great stress that they really, everything's going to need maintenance at some point. So, I encourage you to just get comfortable with working with the bricks. That's why I stress so strongly the clay sand mortar. And it's been a bit of a battle to get here to where we now, we're starting to get enough acceptance that people go, oh, right, I get it, clay sand mortar. Because for a long time, for many years, people would say, oh, but that doesn't seem strong enough. I'm going to get this fireplace mortar. And, I got to the clay sand mortar opinion through trial and error and by trying real mortar. And every time you use real mortar, you'll be disappointed because it will crack. You will have to take things apart, and then you have a real mess and a real difficult time fixing it. Cracks get bigger and just stay bigger. With the clay sand mortar, if and when you get a crack, you can just wet it down and seal it right back up again with your finger just by tucking and pointing. So, just some input there, voice of experience, just a lot of trial and error. It's very easy to get in and out of. Don't be too scared of it. Don't build it like you're never going to get into it. Again, like that's, in my opinion, that's a mistake. Is to agonize the details so much that that getting in there is going to break your heart, because you probably will have to get in there at some point. So Ryan says, I've been surprised at how time-consuming and detail-oriented the brickwork can be. It really can be, and you'll look at mine and you'll notice that it's actually relatively sloppy, and that's I'm sharing the stove designs, not my brick skills, but it's partly by design because of what I just said, because I know that I'm going to be getting back in there. Now, it's nice to build them as beautifully and detail-oriented as you can, and that's one of the joys of using the clay sand mortar, is it gives you a lot of flexibility to undo mistakes, and come back and tighten them up. But if you're looking for perfectly even joints and perfectly level things and perfectly spaced, joints this way and no lining up joints and all of that stuff, it can be very, very, very detail-oriented, and it can be quite a brain teaser, and it's really satisfying. But it can take a lot of time. Now, there's a lot of tips and tricks that I don't necessarily share because they're more bricklaying specific. But if you search bricklaying on YouTube, you can find a whole host of great videos and tips. One of my favorites is just sort of a mason string line, where they just kind of tie off string at every level. They might use a weighted stick on each end, or they might use things stuck in the mortar with string wrapped around them. But at any rate, they'll put string line at every mortar joint, so they get their mortar exactly the right elevation and exactly the right, level. And they will also use measuring sticks, sometimes called story sticks, or there's other words for them in masons terminology, that have every elevation marked off from layer, mortar gap, layer, mortar gap, layer, mortar gap. And if you make yourself one of those sticks, you can pay attention to the detail on the stick, mark off all your marks, and then you can hold that next to your build as you go up, and you should find your elevations lining up exactly to your story stick. You can use, again, string line combined with that stick, and you can do really nice work if you really pay attention to detail. But that's why Belgian Gulch says that's why bricklaying is a career, and that's exactly right. It's a very highly skilled trade, and while it's really fun and I really enjoy doing my amateur version of it, and I have no qualms with it, there is certainly an enormous difference between when I lay bricks and when a true master mason bricklayer lays bricks. And every now and then someone comes through my channel and they say, well, I'm a bricklayer and this stove looks like crap, and I agree with them. I mean, they're unfortunately missing the point of what I'm trying to share. People will look at my stove and like, oh, it's a beautiful stove, and the bricklayers will come and go, no, it's not, and it doesn't hurt my feelings because I know my brickwork isn't good, and what I'm sharing is the function of it, really. But yeah, they should be proud of their work, and hopefully, it's nice to hear that you recognize how difficult it is and how difficult it is to do well. And so that's actually one of the biggest recommendations I make for people who are apprehensive about building these things and maybe they want a really nice finish. I always recommend to people who say, hey, I'm not comfortable. Do you know anyone in my area who does rocket stove builds? And I'll always recommend, rather than recommending a rocket stove builder, I'll always recommend finding a local mason. Because using my plans, the mason doesn't need the combustion knowledge. So they can build to my plans and they can do it beautifully and they can do it quickly. A good mason could throw up one of my stove bodies like this over here in probably the course of, half a day or so. And it'd be gorgeous. Probably a day. But, they could do such a better job laying the bricks. And the body of the stove, there's really nothing more than just standard brickwork. So that's a really good option for someone if you have a really high standard and you really want perfection in your home and you don't feel like DIYing it. By all means, search local masons, find a local bricklayer. Now you'll have to twist their arm a little bit because they're going to get thrown off by the clay sand mortar. They're going to want to use setting mortars and things like that, so you'll have to stand your ground a bit. But if you can get them to work within, our parameters, you'll get a beautiful stove. So Doug says, I used to be a mason and was a little dubious about clay sand mortar, but I love it. So that's awesome, Doug. I just said all this right before your comment. But he says, I've been adding a lot of ash, which makes it nice and workable, just like regular mortar. And that's a great tip, Doug. Ash does give it a little bit of plasticity, and it does make it feel like a setting mortar. So Mark asks, what proportion ash? And I don't see Doug's answer there, Mark, but I will answer for you that it doesn't take much, a very small amount. You want to sift that ash first through a fine screen if you can to try and get out the chunks, because they will hold, they'll create issues for you in terms of your the way things settle in. But really what you're trying to do is just get a little bit of ash in there to trigger the pozzolanic reaction. And I'm going to get out of my depth with the chemistry. I'll say words that I don't really know what they mean. But, basically what you're doing is you're triggering the beginning of a reaction that has a subtle setting properties. It doesn't set like lime, but it does plasticize the mortar a little bit, gives it a little bit more resiliency. It does tend to set up a little harder. So when I say a very small amount, I usually say my clay sand mortar is 1 part dry clay, 3 parts dry sand, and let's say not even a half a part, like a quarter part, just a very small amount, just a little supplemental ash, and it helps a lot. So Ryan says, I'm only a few layers up after a couple redos, but yes, it's very satisfying and really fun to learn something new, and I hadn't expected that when taking on this project. Well, that's awesome, Ryan. I love to hear it. It's like, I feel exactly the same way, and it's a big part of why I shifted to building out of bricks, because they are heavy and dense and provide an excellent thermal mass for a very low cost. They're incredibly affordable. They're easy to find just about anywhere. They have great properties. They're all natural. They're not bad on the environment. All that stuff that we like. And building with bricks is really fun. I mean, building with cob is fun, but building with cob is a ton of work. Building with bricks is work, but like I said a few weeks ago or last week, it's like a Lego for adults, and it is really enjoyable. And I'm really, really glad that you guys are finding the same thing. So let's see. Tim says, the clay sand mortar in my first batch RMH did vitrify above the manifold, but that was a Frankenstein build and got crazy hot even downstream of the radiator. And Tim, that isn't actually uncommon. You will find some clay sand mortars will vitrify. It's not necessarily a function of temperature as much as it's a function of what your material was. You probably had some excess, other stuff in your clay. If you were to just buy fire clay and sand, you'd probably find you wouldn't be able to vitrify it. But I've definitely used clay sand mortars that I've seen start to do a little bit of that. But again, in most of those situations, I haven't had it be an issue in any of my builds. So David says, I used the Rutland to hold the 1/2-inch thick fire bricks to the CFB core, and the Rutland did not hold as good as I would have liked. Yeah, that's my experience as well, David, and that's why I strongly recommend against the setting mortars. It's simply because as soon as they experience a few versions, what they'll do is they'll set, and then they'll go through a few more cycles of high temp, and cool off, high temp, cool off, and then they'll lose their bond, and now you've just got another hard setup layer in between your bond, and it kind of makes things worse. I've really, at this point, I've gotten to the point where I really strongly recommend people just leave any of those setting products out of their builds entirely. Of course, everyone usually has to find that out on their own, and I don't fault you. I certainly did. I mean, when I'm here, you guys, telling you don't do that, that's a terrible idea, don't get me wrong. I only know that because I did it. I've just been down that thought process. Tim, that goes right back to you with changing secondary air and modifying cores. All of this stuff. It's not, I'm not picking on you guys. It's exactly what I did. It's totally natural. I'm just trying to save you guys the trouble because we've been over it and over and over again. And of course, I've said it over and over again. This might be your first time hearing me say it, so my apologies if I get excited. But yeah, that's it. The setting mortars, the Rutland fireplace mortar, whatever they want to call it. We all are going to see that and go, oh, that seems like that would be the good stuff. And come to find out, there's reasons why, after so many years of trying over and over again, I've settled on clay sand. Now, does clay sand have pros and cons? Yeah, sure it does. The fact that it's soft, it gets wet, it kind of, you can't, it's hard to use outside. It always will kind of dust a little bit, although it does set up pretty hard and stops releasing sand after a while of wiping out the loose bits. Eventually it's all stuck there. There are pros and cons. It does crack with heat, or sometimes, but eventually you get those cracks worked in and they stop cracking. But there's good reasons why I've settled on those as my choices. Now, those might not be what you'll settle on for your choices. In the case of the cores, I kind of compromised, and like in the tiny stove plans, I give you both the brick core and the ceramic fiberboard core, so you can choose whichever one is your preference. But what people will often do is think that by building the fire brick core, they're going to have a core that lasts forever. And then come to find out, they're in there in a few years gluing broken bricks together. So I'm just trying to convey my experience, and that's all. So let me catch up in chat. Let's see. Ryan says, I'm using local clay sand and like it a lot, especially for learning. However, local materials are very brown, which doesn't look quite as nice as Matt's white there. Yes, Ryan, that's something that I don't know if you can see it kind of on the right side of my stove. Yeah, I don't think the picture is good enough here, but I've used a little bit of natural clay sand in mine too, and the colors make a difference. I've done builds on my in the older videos. You'll see builds where I had black sand from that I got down by the river, and I like playing with the different sands and different colors for different aesthetics. But to be honest with you, after years and years of playing with this stuff and coming back and digging clay and sifting it, and I've really come around. It's kind of like the bricks, and maybe I'm just getting old and lazy, or I'm so wealthy now I can afford to buy fire clay and bricks as opposed to digging mud. I mean, that's that was how I would have looked at it a long time ago. And I was just digging mud. I was like, why buy something? This is free. But really, my opinion now is that fire clay is really inexpensive. A 50-pound bag is like $30. I'm just trying to remember. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's fairly inexpensive. And in my opinion, that's money well spent to save you the time of digging and sifting and dealing with gravel and things like that. And the same goes for the brick. I can find clay, red, solid brick at Home Depot for 44 cents a brick, and people will constantly write me and ask, I got bricks with holes, I got bricks that are concrete, and and I'm just, I feel like I understand salvage is awesome, but at some point, it isn't very expensive, and I think it saves you a lot of time to sometimes just get the easier materials to use. Now, don't get me wrong. I love experimenting with the home stuff, the found clay, salvage bricks. It's a great way to do a build. I want to encourage you to do it and not discourage you to do it. But should you find yourself struggling with those materials, or should you find yourself saying, well, it's good, but I don't like it because the color is wrong, or, whatever, I think it's totally okay to just go buy a bag of fire clay. It sure makes the job go faster. You just 3 scoops in your thing, and I'll go buy mason sand these days, because it's sharp and it's just right, and $7 a bag or whatever. So, and 2 scoops of that. I drove to the store, picked it up, got home. It saved me a whole bunch of time in digging and sorting, and I just feel like there's a lot of value there as well. So again, both are fine. But at some point, I just want to say it's okay to buy and use new stuff. Permaculture Playground says, could you use a small amount of slaked lime? Just curious. Personally, I'm fine with using just clay sand. Well, absolutely, Permaculture Playground. You can use really any combination that you want, but my question when adding the lime is why. I think all you're going to do is make things worse, because I think you're going to create something that does start to set up and starts to be not able to be reused, difficult to clean off the bricks, more likely to crack during thermal expansion. I don't think you gain anything. And this is kind of exactly the way I feel when I hear people talking about trying to build some kind of mortar shell inside their firebox to protect the CFB. I feel like a lot of these steps are adding a lot of labor that only leads to something that probably is going to lead to doing more labor down the road. The clay sand is so great because it's flexible, and it won't create maintenance issues, but should you get maintenance issues, they're easier to maintain. Whereas anything that sets more firmly will create its own maintenance issues and exacerbate maintaining it. So I don't see any positivity to adding those setting mortars. Now, the ash is different. It stays flexible. I say it's somewhat setting, but it doesn't really set hard, in my experience. Not like it'll still be able to put that stuff back in the bucket with water, and it will turn back into mortar for you. So I really, really feel like clay sand or clay sand ash is really the ultimate for building these things. So Ryan says, next time I'll probably buy clay sand. Screening the local clay sand is one of the most time-consuming parts. That's exactly right, Ryan. I mean, that's just exactly where I got to. And believe me, I got there believing wholeheartedly that I was going to use found materials. And then after so many builds and building for friends and, going to workshops and all that, I'm just like, let's just buy some. Let's just get right to building and stop screwing around screening mud for hours when really we'd like to be stacking bricks. So there's that. And then Doug says, I'm afraid Matt might not like this, but I use an amount equal to the clay. So 3 sand, 1 clay, 1 ash. And no, Doug, I don't mind that at all. That's fine. I imagine you get a really plasticky mix. I still don't think you're going to get a hard setting mortar that I don't like. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a positive way. I mean, I don't think it's going to set to the point where like I'm going to be disappointed because you can't chip it off, but it does set quite firmly and it will dust less, and it's very nice to work with, as you've noticed in being an ex-mason. You know that does make a difference. You need the mortar stiff enough that you can stack up a few layers without squishing them down through compression. So there's a lot of benefits from the ash, and I don't think 1 part ash is too much. My personal opinion is that you don't need quite so much, so I don't usually, add quite so much. I don't usually have that much, to be honest with you. So, so there's that. I usually just like to add a little bit, just because I usually have a lot less ash than I have clay and sand. So Permaculture Playground says brick is much easier to take apart than cob, especially if the cob has straw in it. Absolutely true, Permaculture Playground. I took apart my cob J-tube down there, and it was a nightmare. I mean, I was in there with breaker bars and a sledgehammer, and what a mess in the room. It lets go of all the microscopic dust and holds on to all the sand, and so you just get this fine dust everywhere, tearing the cob apart. I do find the brick builds they're just far easier every which way. Whether it's putting them together, taking them apart, making changes, adjustments, all of that stuff. So I definitely agree. I love the brick builds. Had a lot of people, had a customer recently doing a custom build asking about, I'll close that window. We'll see if we can get that a little bit better there. Jeez. I tell you guys, troubles everywhere here. It's not much better, is it? So yeah, I do feel like, again, that this end result of bricks and clay sand mortar is from a whole host of trial and error and finding that they just do it much better. So let's see. David Swanson says Permatex worked better because it can penetrate into the CFB better, and it also penetrates into the fire brick better. So that's great. David's referring to how the Permatex is a better adhesion, brick patch than his experiment with the Rutland fireplace cement. So I think that's exactly right. And he says that Permatex has held up for more than 1.5 years. And Ryan says, it's funny to me now that I started this project thinking that it would go together in a weekend for under $200 in materials, and wife will never let me forget that one. And, Ryan, I think that it's not so much that that you couldn't do that, but I think it's probably more just that you're learning that you'd rather not, that you'd rather spend a little money and do things a little differently. I mean, certainly you could take my plans and use salvage bricks and cob and found clay and sand, and you could have an all salvage materials, and you could build something for very, very low dollar investment. But I think you'd invest a lot more time, like you said, screening the clay from your found clay, digging, trying to for me, I spent a lot of time trying to accomplish complex shapes with cob, especially, like my half barrel system is a direct result of me trying to figure out how to form arches out of cob that were strong enough to sit on, and that was all an attempt to avoid, to just use found and free salvage materials. And, at some point it wasn't because I started making a lot more money. It was just, I was like, well, I'm saving like $30 in a bag of clay and $100 of bricks total for the whole thing. And I'm driving all over looking for drums and cutting them in half with, $40 worth of metal blades and metal in my eyes. And, I just kind of came to the conclusion that I'd rather just spend the money on the bricks. They're not very expensive. Save myself some time and play Legos and just be done with it and have a thing that I think is better overall at the end of the day for a lot less messing around. So, and again, that's not picking on any one point. It's just giving you a perspective that's changed over time. I mean, if we were sitting here 10 years ago, I'd be like, don't buy anything, and now I definitely feel differently. And like I said, it's not because my economic situation has changed a whole lot. It's just because I think there's value in spending those dollars. And to be honest with you, I think you're going to spend them either way. Like I said, all that free stuff, I would end up buying saw blades and goggles, and whatever else, a shovel. So there's that. So Belgian Gulch says $8 a bag for fire clay. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's just, at least for me, once I started, getting back into my trades, working on the boats, doing marine electronics and stuff, I just kind of started to value my time a little more. And so, yeah, there's that. And Mark says, if you know a potter, you might get clay trimmings for free. And that's also true. There are places where this stuff is not, not very valuable. So Doug says, another thing that I do is using a laser level. I shoot a point up to the ceiling from each corner, then drop a line. And it's pretty easy when you just have to level and straighten the course. That is an awesome tip, Doug, that it makes a huge difference if you've located your corners and if you have a plumb line that runs down and you can keep the brick corners true with that line, you will have a very, very, very plumb build, and that makes an enormous difference. So again, I have spent hours on YouTube watching master bricklayers do their thing, and every time I learn something. So if you're, getting ready to start your build, I would totally encourage you, if you haven't done much bricklaying before, kind of lay your bricks out, dry stack them a few layers, get your plan figured out, and then before you mix any mortar, spend an evening just chasing bricklaying tips or something like that on YouTube, and I promise you that you will come at your build with a different approach than you had if you hadn't done that. It helps me every time, and I do it almost every time I do a new build. I'll just go kind of get a refresher course, because there's, millennia of knowledge that those guys hold, and so many of them are sharing it with us. It's a really, really, really valuable resource. So let's see. Permaculture Playground says, the lime would make the mix easier to work with. It gets a bit more fatty, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, Permaculture, I do get that. The lime does do that. My fear is just that it's going to then eventually have a reaction and trigger a non-reversible reaction. I think you can get that same fattiness, that same plasticity that I like to talk about, that same ease of working with ash by adding ash, and it won't have quite the same permanent effect. You can always put that mortar back in water, you can always break it apart easily, and should you get cracks, you can wet them down and get them to seal up again. And that's the one thing I worry about with the lime mix, is that should you get cracks, now you're just going to be trying to fill cracks in what is basically a set material, a set medium, and that can be really difficult. So, and I could be wrong about that, maybe just a little bit of lime won't set that hard, but I would encourage you to use ash for that purpose, to give it that body. It makes a significant difference. The addition of ash to clay sand really gives it a nice plasticity and makes it nice to work with. So Manuel, welcome Manuel, by the way, thanks for being here from Spain. He says, hi from Spain. I built a brick rocket stove. How many years takes to open to check the internal health of the chamber? Great question. Great question. So asking about internal cleanouts, and this is a really good question, because most of our rocket mass heater culture stems around flue run rocket mass heaters that are built using 6-inch or 8-inch flue pipes through the bench, and those need clean out all the time. However, if you're building to my designs and you have open bell benches, you can go a long time without cleaning. I mean, I don't want to say indefinitely, because really it's going to depend on how big your bench is and how bad, what kind of fuel you're burning and all sorts of things, but it's highly unlikely that you are ever going to create a situation via ash buildup or downstream detritus buildup of any kind, fly ash, whatever you're getting downstream. Unlikely that you're ever going to get enough buildup to cause any downsides. Now, it's always a good idea to check your chimney, make sure you're burning clean. It's almost impossible if you're using a tried and tested core like we do here. It's almost impossible to have creosote buildup in your chimney, but it's still a good idea to check. But the answer to your question, Manuel, is I really don't think you need to if it's a bell type system. Now, that isn't to say you don't want to, that isn't to say you don't want to look in there once in a while. I think you do. But I think what you'll find is you can check it every second season or whatever, and you'll be like, there's not much of a mess in here. I'm not even going to bother cleaning it out. So if you have small passageways, that are the minimum size, then they may build up a little bit of blockage, and you may want to get in where there are tight passageways to clean those out. But if we're just talking about a big bench, you'll get fluff in the bottom of it, and you could build that fluff up for years and years and years. So I think that hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. So Cletus says, given that the stove body is essentially a bell, any disadvantages to having the wall thickness be thicker, say up to 8 inches, wondering about using stone versus bricks with the clay sand mortar? No, Cletus, that's a fabulous question, and it's a fabulous way to go. The more the merrier. Basically what you're doing is you're adding to your thermal storage by having thicker walls. You will have slower response time. In other words, it will take you longer to heat up the body of the stove, so you will burn for longer. But conversely, you will get longer heating cycle after the fire goes out. So I really, I find that these bricks, the way that I'm laying them, are a really nice, happy medium. But some folks will find that in areas where maybe they really are going to prioritize burning all day and not burning at night at all, and wanting that stove to still be really warm in the morning, thicker walls might be a great way to get you longer burn cycle through the night. And so, you absolutely can adjust those things, and it's impossible for me to give you any figures on it. Every material, every stone is going to be dramatically different. Soapstone will behave vastly different than flagstone or granite. So it's a really good idea to just build it and just play with it and tune it. And if it doesn't work out, you tear the top half down and do it again with bricks or whatever. So I think it's a great way to go. I'd love to see it. Rocks are very, very cool. So Andre says you'd have to have a bigger system, slower response, lower surface temperature. Masonry heaters sometimes use 2 to 3 rows of bricks and are firing the thing only once per day. So exactly right. It's going to change all of the parameters, but whether that's better or worse, I don't think it's actually something to worry about too much. In my opinion, I prefer to just go for it and see how it works, because no one's going to be able to tell you. We can all speculate, but who knows how you're going to use it. So I'd say build it and find out. And I don't think just a single layer of rocks is going to be awful, I think it's something to play with for sure. So Mark says, do you actually do installs in your area, or are you mostly just designer consultant? Well, Mark, I had used to do quite a few installs. I've taught workshops. I was out at Paul's place, Permies Paul, quite a few times for workshops, and did builds there, and I've done workshops and builds at various homes and farms and communes, kind of all over. I've been to New Hampshire and really all, from coast to coast, doing builds and workshops for people. Now, in the past year, of course, all that's pretty much dried up with the pandemic stuff, so I haven't been traveling. I've gotten a few opportunities, but I've turned them all down just because it hasn't seemed like it's time to travel. And to be honest with you, I think those days are probably over for me. I'm not that interested in building things for other people as much as I am just being a part of the design, aspect. So these days I'm mostly just doing custom design, custom consults. And then, like I said, what I'll always do is recommend that if you need a build in your area, I actually think hiring a local mason is better than even hiring me, because I can communicate with you and the mason, and I can convey the subtleties of the combustion part of it. But really, it's the laying of the bricks. It's you don't need to know about the combustion stuff, because I can hold your hand through that. I can tell you that chamber's too small, put it over there, whatever. That's easy for me to do. And a good bricklayer can easily follow my plans and make a stove that's far more beautiful than I could ever build, and in far less time, far more quickly. So I don't do much of that, and I think that my days of doing those installs are probably over. So there you go. Short Bus Life says, I cheated and put a heat shield around my barrel and then put granite chippings between it, but I'll probably get one of your designs once I'm earning again. Well, that's not cheating, Short Bus Life. That's a totally adequate way to go. Of course, I'd love it if you wanted to purchase one of my designs, but I think that's a totally great way to go. So tune to preference is the answer again, says Cletus. It seems like. And I think the bricks will end up being easier. And he says, guess I could add a second skin later. So Cletus, that's really what I've come down to. And I do think tuning to preference is really the way to go. I think rocks are gorgeous. It would be really difficult, I think, if you have all sorts of weird shaped rocks. It'd be hard to get a consistent stove body that was built with just a single skin of rock. So I think kind of the best choice here is probably the inside skin of bricks and then an outer skin of rocks. It seems like that's an easier way to go. And Ryan says he's planning to use green slate as a second skin on the bricks for the sides of his bench, which would be gorgeous, Ryan. So yeah, we'd love to see your photos when you get that done. So, it seems like we've talked for an hour. I didn't get quite to all of my things, but that's okay. None of them were terribly important. I want to share, you guys, I think this is going to be I said it last week, but I have decided, this is going to be the last stove chat of the season. So I have sure been enjoying our times together. I've been loving the community, but it's getting to be warm and sunny, and I'm turning the corner into spring here, and I've left you guys 40 hours of chat this season, so I think I am going to take a break and let the questions and the comments and all that stuff sort of refill the coffers, so we don't come here and keep going over the same old topics. So with that said, I won't be back next week. I think we'll probably start up, I'm not exactly sure when. I'm thinking probably late summer, fall, to start Stove Chat up again for the new year. I will probably, who knows, maybe we'll do a few chats in between then. Not regular ones, but maybe we'll come back and do one in the late spring or something, depending on how the, what kind of input I get from you guys. But definitely have been really enjoying our time just together. I'm going to miss meeting with you guys every Wednesday, but I think it'll be good to recharge the batteries, like I said, and let some things brew. I'll get some more builds to share with you guys and stuff like that. So with that said, I hope you guys have a delightful rest of your winter. If you are getting into your build just now, by all means, please email me with your questions and comments. I'd love to help you with your build. Share your builds with me through photos. I'll start collecting a collection of all the great builds, and we'll be able to do some more full episodes of customer builds. I've just really appreciate you guys being here in this community, so I absolutely will be back. I will, in the meantime, hopefully post some videos as well. The Stove Chat does kind of pull me away from some other video projects, so keep your eyes on my channel. I'll hopefully have some videos for you in the coming months, sharing some things. I'd like to go a little bit deeper into like some bricks, how to tell good bricks from bad bricks and things like that. Stuff we can't do as much here in Stove Chat, so hopefully I'll find some time to do that. And what can I say, you guys? Let me say from the deepest depths of my heart, thank you all so much for all of your support and your lovely community. I feel like we've really got a great thing going here. I think we're really moving things forward and making the world a better place, and that's really the goal here. So I can't tell you enough how much I've enjoyed it, and I'm just stumbling on my words now. So I will hit the outgoing video, and I hope you guys just have a wonderful spring. Just keep at it, you guys. Let's keep making progress. And thanks all you guys. I really appreciate hearing your thank yous as well. So with that, I'll hit the outgoing video, and I'll see you guys before too much longer. All right, you guys? All right, take care, you guys. See you soon.